So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Brooke Kent. I'm the owner of Brooke Writes It, and for the last 20 years, I've helped executives and professionals with their resumes and LinkedIn profiles and interview strategies. And today we have with us as our guest expert for my monthly webinar, Shannon Bills. And Shannon is an audition, confidence, and mindset coach for actors. She's helped cast 50 plus TV shows over the last 7 years. So she certainly knows about the anxiety and stress that you can feel when you're auditioning or interviewing and what that experience of being rejected can feel like. So Shannon, I would love if you would introduce yourself to everyone. And if they would like to get in contact with you later, about your audition and confidence coaching that you offer, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Perfect. Yeah. So thank you for having me, Brooke. My name is Shannon Bills. I am a former actor, a kid actor, teen actor. When it came time for college, I decided to go the business route, and that's where I fell in love with casting. And I, like Brooke said, worked on over 50 TV shows, comedy shows that are on NBC, CBS, ABC, Netflix, Hulu, a bunch of shows. And during quarantine, decided to leave casting because I knew it wasn't my life's purpose. And I really wanted to coach actors and really work around mindset. Mindset is so fascinating to me because I think it's the most important thing that anybody can practice. It's what gets you out of bed in the morning. And so, yeah, I am this mindset coach, this confidence coach. I still do audition coaching on the side for actors, but I'm excited to talk about mindset today and the rejection that not just actors face, but anybody, and it's all relative to everybody. And yeah, the best way to reach out to me would be either my Instagram, which is at Shannon Bills Coaching, or my website, which is just shannonbills.com.
Thank you so much again for joining us today, Shannon. So let me go ahead and launch us into our topic. And for anyone who's joining us later, I will post a link to a little outline page if that helps you, kind of keep track of where we are as we're going through this. So I wanted to start with two basic questions. And first was, what is rejection? And does how you handle or respond to job search rejection even matter? So the dictionary defines rejection as the state of being dismissed or refused or not accepted. Clearly, all of those things are very negative. It's no picnic, being rejected. So does how we respond and handle job search rejection even matter? I think absolutely we would all say that intuitively, but the studies back that up. There was a study of 155 Dutch professional musicians, and they found that 91% felt anxious before they auditioned, and 55% of those said that that negatively impacted their performance. There was another study of 291 Pakistani textile workers, and those who felt the most sensitive to the rejection actually performed 37% worse in their careers, which I thought was very interesting. There was another study of 242 US job seekers, and they found that those who dwelled the most on being rejected, then as a logical result, submitted less resumes, spent less time, applying for jobs, and as a result had a job search that was 39% less effective. So I wanted to turn this over to Shannon. Those are kind of the cold, hard numbers, but Shannon, I would love for you to share your experience. Can you start us off on a light note and share a funny story about a time when you were, casting a TV show and an actor was really scared of being rejected? How did that play out in the casting room?
Yeah. So, there's hundreds of examples, and I think it really was something every day. I could totally sense when an actor was nervous or in their head. And I think at the end of the day, it's important to know everyone is a human, right? Everybody, there's no hierarchy. That's just what we create in our mind. And so I think if you can go in with this neutral ground, you're going to perform better. And so when actors would come in, I would always like to set the tone that, hey, this is a very comfortable environment, and like, take your time, take your moment if you need it. And so there really wasn't one specific moment that stood out because it just was something that would happen every single day. And once actors would kind of calm themselves down, it really was night and day between their first read, their first go at an audition, being really nervous and anxious. And then once I would see that, I'd say, hey, let's not worry about the words. Let's just talk for a minute. Let's shake it out. You have nothing to be nervous about. They would perform way better, after calming themselves down.
Right. And I'm sure as someone who was casting, that helped you better evaluate, their performance once you could actually see what their true acting ability was and not just
Mhm.
their fear of being rejected, right?
Totally, totally.
Can you tell us, obviously, you've really, specialized and helped actors, but how do you think this more broadly translates over to the business and professional realm? When we're experiencing that same fear of being rejected, when we're job searching, when we're interviewing, how do you think that kind of plays out? And why do you think it's so important to respond to rejection in a healthy way?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is, bear with me here, but when I audition kids,
Hmm.
they are so fearless and so fun, and they don't even know what they're doing half the time, but they're just excited to be there. And
Right.
I always tell people if we can just bring our inner child out
Hmm.
where we don't even know how big a concept fear and rejection is, if we can go back to why we're there in the first place and we're just simply doing something that we love, that can really take the pressure off everything. And so I meant to mention that before too. Like auditioning kids really in itself was a life lesson for me to be like, I need to be like these kids because they are just happy to be here and they're not worried about all the other people in the waiting room. They
Yes.
just trust that they know their stuff and they're going to perform it. And so I think experiencing that is super helpful. I don't know if I touched upon your question at all. What was your question? I
Well,
just
I
wanted
was
to
just
make that
asking you how you see this translating over just from the acting realm over to the more broadly, whether someone's interviewing to be a sales manager or a programmer, or whatever, type of role, how do you think this kind of translates into something that everyone experiences?
totally. Yeah, I mean, what it comes down to is you're clearly applying for a job because you have some
Mhm.
interest in it, right? And so you want to kind of ask yourself, why am I the best person for this job? You need to start asking yourself questions, checking
Mhm.
in with yourself, building up your own confidence because we can't look for external validation. It always has to come from within. And when we can build ourselves up,
Mhm.
that is what I teach my actors to do to nail the audition, to get rid of the rejection. And really everything I'm teaching them can translate to any sort of situation that where you might feel like inferior
Mhm.
to the situation you're walking into. And I think if you can just ask yourself, hey, why am I here? Why is this important to me? Bring it back to your why
Mhm.
instead of how it's all going to happen. I think that is probably the answer I give the most around that. And I think that could be reflected in job world, actor world, anything.
Yeah. So I think that transitions us beautifully into the four strategies that we're going to talk about today. And to make it easy to remember, we've chosen words that all start with D. So we're going to talk about discern, detach, dump, and decide. So the first one, discern, flows naturally into what Shannon was talking about. So here we're talking about that the first strategy to deal with job search rejection is to discern, to, really truly figure out what type of job would I really enjoy, because like Shannon said, you don't want to go through the heartache, of auditioning or interviewing for a job if it's not something that you're actually going to enjoy doing, right? You need to come back to your why, and so as you consider that question, what happens if you're like many job seekers and that the answer for what you would really truly enjoy is that it's something different, than what you've been doing? If you're in that situation, I want to encourage you to take heart. You are not alone. Actually, LinkedIn dubbed last year, 2020, the year of the career pivot because so many people are making changes in the scope or the nature of their work. And statistics bear that out. The average American will change jobs 12.3 times over the course of their career. And of that, 5 to 7 times are career pivots, like major changes in the scope or the nature of your work. And so really, truly try and sit down and think, what type of job would I truly enjoy? Because I would hate to see you go through the heartache of being rejected if it's for a job that you wouldn't have liked anyways, and think about what you would truly be passionate about. So, Shannon, let me turn this over to you because I know one of your key principles is helping your clients shift from kind of a fear based mindset to a love based mindset. So talk to us about that and how, operating from, what would I truly enjoy? What is my why? What would I love to do? Can help take a lot of the fear out of that being rejected.
Yeah. So I love talking about this because one of my first mentors, who is this wonderful woman who is my massage therapist, she was telling me how you can really only have two human emotions, love and fear, and everything stems from one or the other. And
Mhm,
you also can't be in a place of love and feel fear at the same time, and vice versa. You can't be in fear and feel love. You're really just coming from one place or another. And so I love bringing this to anybody because
mhm,
I think I always say as humans, but I'm also very spiritual, where I could talk about energy and stuff. But as human beings, it's very easy to shift into fear, to
right.
focus on what's not in front of you, focus on the
Mhm,
lack. Why isn't this here? Why did this
mhm,
happen? Why this? Why that? And I feel like we're more designed to shift towards the fear. It's
mhm,
harder to make that transition to go, I have everything I need in front of me.
right.
Life is great. Life is perfect.
Mhm,
And most people would look at you thinking you have five heads when you're talking from that love base mindset. But really, that's how we all need to feel. We need
mhm,
to constantly remind ourselves, okay, what is my current state of being right now? Is it
mhm,
fear based? Is it love based? And a good, easy switch is figuring out the abundance around you, right? Do you have a roof over your head? Are you eating a nice lunch?
mhm,
And I know someone would say, well, how does that have to do with my job? Well, if you're
mhm,
focusing more on the love and focusing on all the good around you, you're going to attract that. There's something called the universal laws, law of attraction being the most popular from the book, The Secret. And it just means like attracts like. So if
mhm,
you're focusing on the fear, you're going to attract more fear. If you're focusing on the love, you're going to call in more love into your life. You're going to call in more abundance, and therefore even call in jobs that you desire, jobs that
mhm.
make you feel good. Um, so that's talking about that love and fear-based mindset.
Mhm. And I think, probably all of us, can put ourselves back in the shoes of when we've been interviewing for a position. And if we go in really fearful or anxious or stressed, whatever we think, about, how energy and other things work, certainly people can pick up on our body language and our
Mhm.
mindset and our attitude. Versus
Mhm.
if we go in confident in ourselves and secure, that we are a worthy person, whether or not we get this job, that confidence is very visible, to the people who are interviewing us, and they have a much different reaction, to if you're coming from this place of I'm going to be okay whether or not I get this job, to really desperate, like I really, really, really need you to hire me. It's kind of two
Mhm.
different vibes that we're giving the interviewer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to be coming in from a desperate energy, because that desperate energy, that means you're throwing away your power. You want to
Mhm.
contain all that power.
Yes. So, let's kind of move to the next step of the process, which would be detach. And I think this is the part that all of us as human beings really struggle with. So I think, we should spend the most time here. So, detach means that we need to detach our sense of self worth from the fact that we got rejected, right? And that is like so easy to say. And I think it's extremely hard to do, right? Because being rejected, being kind of dismissed, refused, not accepted, it's a very negative experience. And it's so easy to take it personally. But like our mom and dad or grandma or grandpa would have said, we need to not take it personally, right? In order to have a successful job search, we need to really internalize and realize that we are worthwhile, special, valuable people, and our sense of worth does not hinge on whether or not we get this job. And, I want to share a few numbers and then I'll turn it over to Shannon because I think this strategy is so important. For the average job, 250 people apply for each job opening. So if you walk through those numbers, out of those 250, 4 to 6 will get interviewed and one will get hired. So if we back out to that, that means that since only one person out of 250 gets hired, you have a 99.6 chance of getting rejected, right? And so that sounds extremely depressing, but I think there are two pieces of good news in that. first is if you got rejected, you are not alone, right? 248 other people besides you also got rejected. So remember that you are a worthwhile, valuable, special person, whether or not you get this job. And that same is true for those 248 other people. The second thing that I think it tells us is that we really need to keep a lot of arrows in our quiver, right? Don't pin all your hopes on one particular job, because then your hopes are going to be crushed if you don't get it. The most successful job seekers will apply for 10 to 15 positions each week. So do what's within your control. Make a plan to apply for 2 to 3 positions each weekday, and then you'll have lots of opportunities in your pipeline, and you'll feel more confident and secure and able to approach it, Shannon, like you said, from that place of abundance. And for those who don't kind of have that job search plan, I have a weekly template that I'll link up that you can use as a starting point. But just consider how you can have a lot of opportunities in your pipeline, and also that you are not alone if you got rejected. So Shannon, I want to turn this over to you, because I'm sure this is where you spend the bulk of your time coaching actors and people, because it's so hard to detach our sense of self-worth from the fact that we got rejected. So can you talk to us about that? Because I'm sure this is kind of the main area where people struggle.
Totally. Those numbers are way bigger for actors. So if we're casting a series regular, lead of a new television show, and especially in an age category, for instance, like 20s to 40s female,
Right.
probably the biggest bulk of actors in that age category, we are casting one person, and we probably get anywhere from 2,000 to 5,000 submissions. And so I think it's easy for actors to forget about those numbers. But like you said, those numbers aren't there to scare you. They're there to just say, hey, it's okay if nothing happens, because the odds are always against you. And you have to be okay with that. I think you touched upon some really good points about, one, detaching from the outcome and not having all your eggs in one basket, right? I tell actors this: do not focus on this is the job for me. This is going to pay my bills. This is a make it or break it situation, because again, you're coming from the fear base. You're now signaling your energy saying, I don't have this thing yet. I now need this thing. That's not coming from a place of love. Coming from a place of love is, hey, I'm going to do my best. And that to me is all I can do. And I know that a door is going to open when a door is going to open. My mom always told me, for every no, there's a yes down the line. And I really do believe that. I do believe that there is a right place and a right time. And some of the reasons, having been in casting, to figure out why someone didn't get a role, it's the silliest reasons that I've heard. It could be hair color, it could be eye color, it could be your skin tone is a little bit lighter or a little bit darker, or they don't look like the lead, or they look too much like somebody we cast. And
Wow. Things that are totally out of your control, right? As a person.
It's totally out of your control. And an actor never gets to hear that part, right? They never get to hear how close they came. Same with a job interview. You never know. There could have been people in the room who were pushing for you hard, saying, I really want this person. But then let's say the ultimate decider, the director, whoever says, you know what, I just like the other person a little bit more, or the other person's energy just fits a little better. And we can't take it personal. At the end of the day, we just have to know that we've done a good job. And I know it's always easier said than done, but once you fully believe that and practice that over and over again, it will soften the blow each time.
Right. And I think, like you said, since we don't have that insight into the hiring manager's mind and how they made that decision, it can be easy to take it personally rather than being able to have the objective feedback that, I code in C++, they wanted someone who coded in Python, or I specialize in governmental contracts and they needed someone who did corporate ones, or whatever the thing is. It's not an indictment of us personally or a reflection of our worth. It's just that they needed something different.
Totally.
Shannon, I would love if you could share with us, because I'm sure you've spent so much time working with, actors that you coach on this. What was an aha moment of a time when an actor really truly internalized, this fact that, that their self-worth as a person did not hinge on whether or not, they got this role? And then what, difference did that make in how they approached auditioning or interviewing?
Yeah. So I really saw this when I started coaching this last year because
Mhm.
on the casting side of things, I just saw them for the interview or the
Right.
audition process. I never got to see how
And
they
not when
felt
you crushed
after.
their hopes and dreams after you rejected them.
Right. Exactly. So, talking about all of the wonderful actors that I've
Mhm.
gotten to work with this entire year so
Mhm.
far, um, when they come back to me and say, you know what? Old me would have been really bummed out that I didn't get a call back or didn't book the role. But
Mhm.
I felt so good about that performance, and that to
Mhm.
me is the best feeling in the world. And that's what I'm hearing more and more from
Mhm.
people that I work with, and that to me means I've done my job
Right.
because we're now focusing on our self-worth. We're shifting internally instead of the
Mhm.
validation externally. And that happens time and time again. And I have one client, well, multiple clients who will say, I kept saying, oh, I want an audition to come in. I really want an opportunity to come in. And because, again, that's still coming in from a lack mindset saying, why isn't it here?
Mhm.
Instead, they just kind of release the pressure, right? Let go
Mhm.
of what needs to happen. And when they did that, they started getting phone calls left and right. I have an audition for you. I have this
Yeah.
opportunity for you. And that is just no coincidence. That is really how that energy works, where
Mhm.
you release that pressure, you're going to be calling in a lot new opportunities and blessings. And I work with a lot of people, specifically with mindset,
Mhm.
who will text me or email me with these discoveries on a daily basis.
Right. And I think, Shannon, like you said, we need to focus on what is within our control and not what is not within our control, right? So what's within our control is, are we keeping a lot of eggs in our basket? Do we have a lot of opportunities in our pipeline? Are we applying, and looking for positions? When we do get the chance to interview, are we prepared? Are we, going in confident, of what we could do to help that company? And then what's not within our control is what they decide, right? So, over my years, of working with clients on their resumes and LinkedIn profiles and their job searches, the clients who are the happiest, the least stressed, and the most successful are the ones who focus on the process rather than the outcome, because the outcome of, when do I get a job, is not within their control, right? Because they are not the hiring manager. What's within their control is the process, and how they are approaching that, and so focus on what is within your control, on the job search. And then, like you said, Shannon, it's very easy to say and hard to do, try and release, that pressure and the anxiety over, I need this outcome right now.
Mhm. Yep, exactly.
Yeah. So let's, talk about our next strategy, which is dump, because clearly, it's a negative experience when we get rejected. So by dump, we mean that you need to be able to feel your feelings. And clearly, it's very negative when you get rejected, but you need to feel those feelings in a safe way, kind of dump them in a safe space and then be able to move on in a healthy way. And so, maybe that means, that you're journaling. Maybe it means that you're talking to a trusted friend or counselor or coach. Regardless, this is not the thing to share as your public status update on Facebook, because almost every employer will be checking those publicly available socials. So this needs to be in a safe space that's safe for you and also safe for your job search, and I think the science, bears this out. They've actually done studies and they found that job seekers who are self aware perform 11% better in their job searches than those who aren't. And so I think there is an effect if we bottle up and don't acknowledge our emotions. We do need to be able to feel those negative feelings, but then we need to kind of be able to leave them in a safe space so we can move on in a healthy way. So Shannon, talk to us about that. If people's budgets doesn't allow them to talk to a professional like a counselor or coach, if they're talking to a friend or if they're journaling, what are some examples of ways that you've seen effective, be effective for clients, and how to kind of be able to dump these feelings in a safe space and then be able to move on?
Yeah, yeah. So I think you touched upon some really good points. And I always tell people it's okay to feel
Mhm.
sad and
Right.
it's okay to feel rejected for a minute, right? That is just going to happen. That it's
Mhm.
just part of living life, right? We
Right.
can't just disappear all of those feelings, right?
Well,
We
and
have to.
Shannon, as you said, if it's an opportunity that we really wanted and we're passionate about, it's normal to feel rejected that we didn't get it, because it was something that we did discern that we would truly enjoy. So we kind of put ourselves out there. And now,
Mhm.
we hear that we're not the right fit for them. It's normal to feel
Mhm.
those negative emotions.
Yeah. And I think it's important to feel those
Mhm,
negative emotions, but then it's important to release them, like you said, because you don't want it to define who you are and you don't want it to feel like a crippling moment, right? This is just, we're witnessing a thought, we're witnessing a
mhm,
feeling, and we're going to let it out. And the best way to me is journaling.
mhm,
I love journaling. I do an entire seminar on journaling,
mhm.
and there's so many different ways that you can journal. And I think some people even get a little anxiety around journaling because they see a blank page and they go, what do I do with a blank page?
Or am
And
I even going to do this right, quote unquote?
right, right. And there's no right or wrong way to do
Mhm,
journaling. A couple of things that I find effective, something called brain dumping. Brain
mhm,
dumping is really just letting out any and every thought in your head onto paper. Even if it doesn't make sense to you, at least you're getting it out of your head.
mhm,
And you're just writing, 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 whether that looks like bullet points,
mhm,
whether that looks like a story, whether
mhm,
that looks like a list, but just getting out and releasing those feelings. Another thing I like to do is checking in with myself, asking
mhm,
myself questions. How am I feeling right now? What do I want to release from my body? What do I
mhm,
want to call in to my energy space? How do I want to make this day better?
mhm,
Check-ins are always really, really important, and they're easy ways to release and
mhm,
reflect on what's happening. And then lastly, I would say, well, I have a couple of more tips too, but one is reframing, right? And
mhm,
so you can take that negative thought and reframe it to a positive. You can do this with anything and everything, and there's a couple of steps. So, first, you write the fear down, or you write
mhm,
the thought down. Then you write why it's not true. Why is
mhm,
that thought actually just made up in our heads? Why is this just a story that's on repeat in
mhm,
our heads? Let's really write out why that's not true.
mhm,
And then the last step is rewriting the story, right?
mhm,
So instead of saying, I messed up at my interview today, well, why is that not
mhm,
true? Well, it's not true because I prepared, I felt confident, I
mhm,
just, that's why it's not true. And now you're rewriting the story. I did not mess up at my interview today. I
mhm,
felt really good. I felt confident. So now you've taken it from all angles where you broke the fear down,
mhm.
saw why it's not true, and you're leaving with a positive statement, reprogramming the brain.
Right. So that takes us right into our last D, which is decide, which is literally, decide, how to evaluate your thoughts and then reframe them in a positive way. And so I'll piggyback on what Shannon said, and then we'll talk about this a little more. I think our thoughts are so powerful, and oftentimes we underestimate the power of our thoughts. They found in the study of almost 1,000 job seekers that the job seekers who were able to reframe their negative self talk were 35% more effective in their job searches than those who didn't. And so I think we need to take a moment to step back, look at our thoughts when we're having that negative thought, just like you said, just kind of consider it like a scientist would consider a specimen under a microscope. Ask ourselves, is this thought true? Is it logical? Is it rational? Is it even helpful to my job search? And if it's not, how can we reframe it? So, Shannon, let's, go through some common thoughts, that I've had clients had. If a client is thinking, I hope I like them when they go into an interview, what would be a more helpful way to reframe that?
I hope they like me.
Right. Because then we're, like you said, kind of keeping ourselves in that position of power, and that
Mhm.
we're interviewing them as much as they are interviewing us. What if a
Mhm.
client is thinking, this is my one and only chance to get hired? What would be a more helpful way to reframe that in terms of, approaching the interview as an opportunity to share ourselves?
Yeah, I would say my opportunities are endless and
Mhm.
I attract them effortlessly, and that I am always putting my best foot forward in all of these opportunities.
Right. And so, like you said, to look at it as this is my opportunity to share with them, my story and what I've been able to do in the past, and then not putting all the weight on, I really, really need to get hired, for this
Mhm.
position.
Mhm.
What if someone's thinking, I'm worthless if I don't get this job? How would you encourage them to reframe that thought?
Yeah, so I would definitely break that down and say, well, why do you feel worthless right now?
Mhm,
Did you apply for the job? I think a
mhm,
worthless person wouldn't even apply for the job, right?
mhm,
Did you prepare for the job? Yeah, you probably
mhm,
prepared for the job. So to me, you're just spitting out things that are just not true, right? So really getting them to see, stopping them in their tracks and going,
mhm.
okay, this is my ego coming through right now, you know?
Right. And I think oftentimes, like you said, if we can take that step back from our thoughts, we can ask ourselves, we let our children talk to themselves this way, or would we let our best friend, talk to themselves like this? Because so
Mhm.
many times we are so much meaner to ourselves than we would let a loved one be to themselves. And so by getting a little bit of distance, we can see that this is not a healthy and productive way, to be talking to ourselves.
Absolutely.
Shannon, we've kind of talked about a variety of strategies, for if people, are feeling rejected while they're job searching, how to deal with that in a healthier way. If people are kind of struggling with what we've talked about today, what do you think would be the simplest or easiest thing or tool to use to get started and kind of, reframing how they're viewing rejection?
Yeah, so I definitely think journaling is first and foremost the best thing because sometimes you don't feel comfortable talking to a person yet, or maybe you don't have the money for a therapist. Journaling is free, right? All you need is something to write with and something to write on. And so if you can just give yourself even 5 minutes a day, if you're not a big journaler and the thought of sitting down for an hour is a lot for you, take 5 minutes a day, set a timer on your phone and really just write out these thoughts. How am I feeling today?
Mhm,
How can I make today better? What are 3 goals I have for myself this week?
mhm,
Really just asking yourself anything and everything, seeing where you're at
mhm,
and figuring out ways to fill your cup. And another thing I think in terms of
mhm,
journaling, I always keep a page of when I feel like I'm on empty and I feel like I
mhm.
can't give myself any love, I remind myself things that make me happy. Well, I know that dessert makes me happy. I know that watching TV makes me happy. I know that going outside for a walk makes me happy.
Yeah.
So if you can just keep a list
Mhm,
and keep track of all the things that make you feel good, that way when you're having a day where you just, don't want to do anything, you can simply go to that list and challenge yourself
mhm,
to do one thing that makes you feel good. I think at the end of the day, we always need to be feeling good. No matter what we're doing, what industry we're in, who we are, that is the biggest reminder of all. What is
mhm,
making me feel good? What's not making me feel good? What can I release from my life right now?
mhm,
So I think the most simple, effective,
mhm.
cost-friendly way is journaling, asking yourself questions.
And I will, piggyback on what you said. I think the important thing is to really center ourselves on the fact that we are valuable, worthwhile people, whether or not we get this job, and then we can approach the job search from a place of greater confidence and security if our,
Mhm,
whole sense of worth as a person is not tied up in whether or not, we get, a yes from this particular opportunity.
mhm,
I once heard a New York Times bestselling author say that she had what she called her feel good file. And that is, it was in her case an email file, but you could also, print this out. And when people sent her nice things or praise, a lot of times, we think, oh, that's nice in the moment, but then our brains are so much more likely to focus on negative things than positive ones. And so
mhm,
she would keep this in what she called her feel good file. And then when she got a manuscript rejected, which still happened to her as a New York Times bestselling author, or when her editors said, well, we kind of like it, but we want you to change 2/3 of it, then she could go to her feel good file and it would remind her, of people who had said, oh, what you did really helped me, or this made an impact in your life, or, whatever. And I think if we all had the same kind of thing, then, like you said, when we encounter those thoughts that are not true, logical, helpful, then we have a concrete thing that we can go to and look at and say, look, I did, I made a difference in this company. I made a difference in this person's life. And it can get us back to that place of feeling good about ourselves rather than being so down on ourselves.
totally. Mhm, I love that.
Any other, thoughts, if you, just had 5 minutes with someone that you ran into while you were traveling, if that becomes a thing after COVID, and they told you, Shannon, I'm just really kind of paralyzed by the fear of being rejected while I'm job searching. What would
Mhm.
you tell them in that 5 minutes if you just, had a brief moment in time to spend with them to try and help them with this?
Yeah, I think first thing I would say is how normal it is to feel that way and that you are not alone. I know you might feel alone right now, but this is something that people face every single day,
Mhm,
and that we have the same opportunity to shift from
mhm,
fear to love. So that thought is a fear-based thought. So I would say you also have that equal opportunity to think differently, to show up differently for yourself. So you want to ask yourself, do I want to sit in this crippling fear, or
mhm,
do I want to hopefully release this from my body and make myself feel good? So
mhm,
I would kind of say let's reframe that thought now, right? Like
mhm,
how can we understand how we're not rejected, right? Have there been moments in your life where you felt
mhm,
so happy and on top of the world? Let's
right,
focus on those moments, because
mhm,
that means those moments are still achievable for you. This is not a defining moment. This is
mhm,
just a moment, a little bump that we have to get over. And everybody has to go through it. Life can be uncomfortable
mhm.
sometimes. And we need to choose to shift into those loving thoughts, those happy thoughts, in order to make it a little bit smoother on ourselves.
Right. And I think, like you said, Shannon, history is littered with famous people who got rejected before they, then went on to further success, right? Like I know in the entertainment industry that Oprah was fired from her news anchor job that she had as, a 20 something, because she was, quote, too emotional, right? And then
Mhm.
she, later leveraged that approach to be her greatest strength. I read once that Hugh Jackman was working at a convenience store before he became an actor and was fired because he talked too much to the customers and connecting with their life stories. And so I think actors, because of those famous examples, can appreciate, that people who were rejected can then go on to achieve success. But the same is true for us, whatever your profession, whether you're in sales, marketing, whether you're a STEM person, whether you're a scientist, whether you're an executive, so often, failure is just an everyday normal part of life, and
Mhm.
we can take that failure as an opportunity to learn, to grow, to pivot, and then realize that this failure is not my endpoint. It's one part of my story, and it can be a bridge for me to then be able to learn, grow, do something different.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I always say that this is a learning moment. And
Mhm,
I know a lot of actors who take workshops and then get
mhm,
feedback projected to them that
right,
maybe didn't come off in the most loving way. I say, hey, that doesn't mean you failed. You just asked a
right,
question, you got something thrown back in your face. That's
right.
just a learning moment.
Mhm. Um,
Mhm.
Shannon, any final thoughts before we open it up to see if any of our live guests have any questions?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, I want to thank you for having me today. I think it's so important to talk about mindset, because I think, well, at least I feel as a whole, we are
Mhm,
shifting into being more mindful
right,
and, taking mental health days and checking in with ourselves. That is
mhm,
becoming a very normal conversation, where maybe a few years ago that wasn't the case. But mindset is everything. If you do not have a strong mindset, it can debilitate you in so many ways. And so, again, I'm not saying that to scare you. I'm saying that to say, wow, I have the opportunity to shift my mindset to love, right? And focus on the abundance around me and to focus on the good. And even just by focusing on the good, it's going to make you feel good. And so I think when life hits you with a hard moment,
mhm,
these are some really helpful tools to help you shift
mhm,
out of that fear based to the love based. And at the end of the day, it all comes down to why we're doing the things we're doing, what
mhm,
makes us feel good, and what is the quickest way we can feel good. And I think, having talked today, journaling is a
mhm,
very friendly, cost effective, uh, inner
mhm,
experience you can have that can be very private. This whole journey can be private if you want it to be. So
mhm.
really take what you need.
Right. Thank you so much, Shannon. It's been such a pleasure to have you as our guest today. And I will piggyback on what Shannon said. the mindset is something that is completely within our individual control. And so don't underestimate the power of your mindset. If you are approaching your job search from a mindset that is positive, that is rooted in the confidence that you are a worthwhile, valuable person just because of who you are, that you have achieved great things in the past and you can do so again in the future, that you are going to keep a lot of arrows in your quiver and eggs in your basket, not pin all your hopes on one opportunity, then all of those things can go towards, when you do hit those bumps in the road and, you're among those 249 people who get rejected from the opportunity, or in Shannon's case, the thousands of actors getting rejected for that one casting thing, then we can tell ourselves, I'm not alone. I'm doing what I love. This is my opportunity to share, who I am with these people, and the right opportunity will come along, at the right time, like you said. Are there any questions before we wrap up from our live guests? And of course, for those who are watching the recording later, feel free to contact either me, Brooke Kent at brookewritesit.com, or Shannon at shannonbills.com with any questions. But any questions from our live guests before we wrap up?
We're good.
I have one.
Yes, yeah. Go ahead.
What do you recommend right before an interview to get in the right mindset?
That's a really good question. So again, I think it comes with what makes you feel good. Do you want to listen to a podcast before to kind of like amp you up? Do you want to listen to your favorite song? Do you want to meditate and just quiet your mind and focus on your breathing? Do what feels good. And as long as you prepare in advance, I don't think moments before an interview, you need to focus on the questions, right? If anything, that kind of gives off a nervous vibe. I would just sit in your power. And whether that means to just put on some calming music or amp yourself up, you have to ask yourself, what voice do I want to hear today? Is it the cheerleader? Is it the, football coach saying, come on, you can do it? Is it someone who's a little bit more gentle in their guidance? And, again, it's going to take a little bit of time because nerves are very normal. But if you can set the intention saying, I have all my power with me right now, and focus on your breath, that always has helped me. And a little bit of nerves to me is actually good. I just find that it welcomes newness, because you obviously want to focus on what you can control in that moment. You can focus on your mindset. You can focus on your breathing. You can focus on your attitude, right? But if you plan every single thing to a T and you don't welcome any newness, you're going to get cut off when newness comes in, and that's going to throw you off. So to me, like having just a little bit of nerves is powerful in a way, because to me it's saying, hey, there's going to be some newness coming in the next 30 minutes or so, and I welcome that, So just finding more empowering thoughts and ways to calm you down beforehand.
And I would piggyback on what Shannon said with, two thoughts, for the clients where I help coach them, for interviews. I think the most helpful part of that they find is just the opportunity, like Shannon said, to work through a bit of those nerves ahead of time, right? Because then when they sit down for an actual interview, it's not their first, experience recently of being interviewed. And so if you're not hiring an interview coach, have a trusted family member or friend, walk you through some common interview questions, just to kind of get comfortable in telling those stories. I always encourage my clients to, before the interview, in addition to doing your research on that company and this particular person that's interviewing you, also take time to think about 5 or 6 stories from your career. And then you can, like politicians do in a debate, take whatever question comes at you, and then you've kind of got a story in your pocket that you can kind of adapt, to answer this question, because people think in terms of stories. And so when they have a question about how did you overcome challenges or adversity, or, how did you, bring in a project on time, even though there were obstacles, then you have some stories, to tell about that. And then the last thing that I would encourage people to do is, I think people who really care about interviews can sometimes describe themselves as feeling like they had an out-of-body experience in the interview because they were so much in their head. And so before, you do the interview, whether it's on Zoom or if it's in person, I encourage my clients, take maybe the 5 minutes before the interview starts to check in with all 5 of your senses to try and get yourself back into your body and not just in your head. So, ask yourself, what am I seeing? What am I touching? What am I smelling? Am I tasting anything in my mouth? And it sounds so silly and basic, but just by checking in with all 5 senses, we can kind of bring ourselves back into our body, notice our breath, and try and get ourselves just out of our head so that we're feeling more confident and self-assured for the actual interview. Any other questions before we wrap up? Okay. Well, if you have any questions later, and for those who are watching the recording, please feel free to follow up. Again, I'm Brooke Ken at brookewritsit.com. This is Shannon Bills at shannonbills.com. Shannon, thank you again so much for joining us today. It was an absolute pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me. It was awesome. I really love talking about this, so thank you.
Thank you again. And for those who are either watching the recording later or with us today, my next webinar will be April 12th with Dominique Anders, and I would love to have you join us for that. Wishing you guys each a lovely rest of your week and a great start to spring.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.